They launched 247 new Copilot. Well, not that many, but there was definitely a focus on AI. They now have autonomous agents living in the system. I don't know why none of those people have seen The Matrix and why they couldn't come up with a better name or a better way of phrasing it.
The best thing about being me, there's so many me.
Microsoft Ignite happened the week of November 19th, and they combined two shows together, one for end users and one for manufacturers. We get three really smart people to break it down and find out what surprised them and the big takeaways of Ignite 2024. All that and more next on AV Week. This is AV Week, episode 693, recorded Friday, November 22nd, 2024. Agents in the system. This is AV Week, your weekly wrap-up of the biggest AV news and information. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. With us to discuss that news and information, it is a star-studded show. I don't have to do anything. It is my favorite kind of these. First and foremost, David Danto. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. I'm not really David Danto anymore. I'm sorry. I'm now an autonomous agent living in the system. I'm taking care of things automatically, and that's one of the themes we heard from this week is all these agents working for us in the system. So thanks for inviting me.
We'll get to the theme because we are covering Ignite. That's what this episode's about. Neil Fluester, he is from Crestron. He is not an autonomous agent. So how are you, sir?
Hello, Tim. I'm very well and enjoying Chicago exceptionally well. Chicago.
Thank you.
I need to go on a diet, though. These pizzas are just insane. It's like a casserole in a pie. I don't know how you guys manage to get so many calories in such a small delivery mechanism. It's amazing.
So many. You can't even hear through that accent.
Calories. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Metric. It was 70 calories metric.
That's what you should. You should.
It's not imperial.
Neil is still in Chicago. You should go to a football game.
Okay.
It won't be a particularly good football game because the Bears are playing, but it is
soccer. This is football or soccer? Sorry.
No, this is football. When I say football, it's football.
Okay.
I'll say soccer/English football or whatever.
Okay.
Anyhow.
All right.
Go
Hello,
see the
everyone.
Bears.
Hi.
And last but not least, my buddy Craig Durr. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am well. You're not nearly as boisterous as these other two.
No, I'm going to come in slow and steady and just leave with a big boom. But I appreciate being here as well too. So
Microsoft Ignite was this week that we're recording it. Danto made reference to it. 19th to the 21st of November in Chicago, Illinois, my home state. And this was the first time that Microsoft combined two previous events. It used to be they'd do an event just for partners, so manufacturers, software folks, things like that. This is why Neil's there as a Crestron. And then they do a separate one for customers, for end users, for IT managers, for AV managers. And they combined it for the first time this year. CEO of Microsoft kicked it off with a keynote. Danto, we'll kick off with you here. What were the big takeaways of Ignite this year?
Well, like every other unified communication space, which Microsoft is a part of now, it was a big AI story. They launched, 247 new Copilot. Well, not that many, but there was definitely a focus on AI. I was making the joke before about agents. They now have autonomous agents living in the system. I don't know why none of those people have seen The Matrix and why they couldn't come up with a better name or a better way of phrasing it. But some of them were really good. Now, I've been a naysayer about how much the AI hasn't really helped unified communications, how it's sort of been an afterthought with generative AI. But, that one of their agents, the interpreter agent, the idea that it can sample your voice in real time and then have you speak almost your exact voice in somebody else's language during a call, that really helps communication. So that was one of many agents that they put in there. They announced that Microsoft Places is their version of hybrid working help selection bot living in the system is now GA. They announced new partners for MDEP, even though we still aren't using MDEP because Intune's not ready with their AOSP version. So MDEP is still hanging out there.
We have a rule. MDEP's an acronym. So what's it stand for?
The Microsoft Device Ecosystem Platform.
Thank you. Continue.
You're welcome. Which has been announced now for a couple of years, but and there are products that have it, but we can't be used yet. And there was a big focus on honestly money. Voice products went up. You know, you add $1 or $2 a month per user for people using voice systems. That's a lot of money that Microsoft makes for over 300 million users. And they discontinued some products and switched some products over. A lot of the things we talked about, the agents and Microsoft Places, are part of the premium stack. So a lot of the underlying message was, this stuff's going to be more expensive. So those are the big takeaways for me anyway. And it was good to see the partners and everybody saying, rah, rah, go Microsoft, because Microsoft's the new Bell system. Microsoft's the new monopoly.
It is. It's funny you mentioned the money. There was a story in the Wall Street Journal a couple of weeks ago about the chief financial officer of Microsoft and how they are pouring $3 to $4 billion with a B into this AI, and how she is kind of writing these folks, the product managers of the agents and of Teams specifically. Okay, we've spent this money. Now let's start seeing that come back. It's a fascinating story. I'll have Mitchell put a link to it.
Yeah, you're starting to see a lot of this build up, and the Microsoft and other companies, they're investing in nuclear power. To try and get it's an interesting thing.
3 Mile, they're ramping up 3 Mile Island back
again. Yeah, and nobody thinks that's a bad idea. So I'm, or at least nobody that's
apparently they missed the movies from the 70s with Michael Douglas.
So I mean, those are the bigger stories. I want to give the other guys a chance to chat about it, but I think those are the big takeaways. That a lot of AI and still not a lot of it proven, but some really interesting options out there.
All right, Neil, same question. What were your big takeaways?
Well, I was surprised there wasn't more mention of Copilot. I thought that they kept that kind of quite low key, and there wasn't much discussion around this Copilot thing. Oh, it's a joke. Everything was Copilot everywhere. I think the interesting Danto's covered a lot of the cool stuff. MDEP was interesting. I think it's good to have people like Shaw announced on MDEP as well as audio code. So that's obviously a growing area, and a lot of the vendors. I mean, Jabra were kind of leading the charge on that originally, and they're just bringing more people, so that's going to grow.
And Barco was also the first vendor. They weren't announced there, but they're doing it for more than just MTROA. So this whole ecosystem play is actually really big for MDEP. If AOSP ever gets released in Intune.
Yeah, Barco wasn't actually at the show, but Jab were there showing talking about MDEP as well as Shaw and Audio Code. So, and again, it's going to be great that you're going to have the DSP partners loading their DSPs onto an MDEP device. So that's going to be great. Obviously, you mentioned Places, that GA, that was great. I think the Ilya's session, again, it is a Copilot show now. It's not Teams is a small part of that, but Ilya's session was 3 deep standing. So there clearly is a lot of interest still in things like Microsoft Teams. Again, he did that demo. When I interviewed him, I said, I'm really annoyed. I've got a 305-day streak on Duolingo learning German, and now it's completely wasted because I can just get Teams to translate my poor English to German now. But the other interesting thing was he did actually mention BYOD again. So speaker attribution is coming to BYOD. That's really cool. And then on the desktop side as well, the idea that you can actually then, when you plug in that USB-C cable on your desktop, in Places, it will know Neil has taken this desk from the USB serial number of the Dell screen or whatever it is, to then feed that back into Places to bring that attribution of Neil is sitting at this desk. So again, lots of interesting stuff around that. That is coming, and I'll throw it now to, I guess, Craig to take us home with what else was announced.
If I may, Tim, the first thing I'm curious, Neil, is will it help you pronounce Chicago properly? The Microsoft
Chicago. There's no. It's
Chicago. Okay.
Chicago. Well, everyone say after me.
I'll tell you, these guys covered a lot of the things that were of interest to me that I was leaning into the AV and the UC market as well too. So, and we'll probably have a chance to talk more about that. I'll tell you actually, which was, I don't want to say negative, but was reiterated, especially with some side conversations that I had, is Microsoft is not doing a good job of simplifying its Copilot message. There is on the main stage, there were so many different agents. There were so many different Copilots put out. It
Well,
was proliferating.
237 according to Danto.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so you've got a large number of these co-pilots that are becoming very specialized. Not bad. I mean, there's other companies in the market, especially in the CX field, for example, that have very specialized micro bots doing things. But this becomes very interesting. You had one for SharePoint. You had one for Facilitator, whatever. Facilitator, that's another great one to think about. They're also renaming some things. This was actually the concept of Teams Copilot that was introduced or talked about a year ago. And I love this idea. It's the idea that it's a shared agent. All four of us, we're not sending our individual agent to the meeting. There's one agent. We equally have access to it. It's like the universal assistant to our team that does everything and shares everything equally. They've renamed that Facilitator, Teams Facilitator. Great idea. I think it's not a great name. So a lot of confusion around the names and how things are being rebranded. And then the last one, which goes into the licensing as well too. Places I'm really excited about. I've been working with that team actually for a while. A lot of their features have been in release for a while. So a lot of these things have in beta. People knew it was coming, but to be GA. But it's tied to the team's premium licensing. So to actually take advantage of this, you need to actually have your entire install base be on premium to actually be able to do this. So it kind of is disassociated from a physical space type of licensing to individual idea. So my key takeaway, a lot of great innovation, a lot of great partner excitement, still a couple things to kind of clean up, which is the naming conventions and the licensing conventions.
Really quickly, Craig, because you said something there. So my basic understanding when Copilot first came out was that you could have a small unit inside your organization that had the license for Copilot. Let's say in this team, right? Let's say us four as a company, I could give it to Neil and Danto, but you and I, Craig, we didn't have access to it. We didn't pay for it. Are you saying that now you have to either have Copilot or you don't, company wide?
I have to tell you, it's really confusing. We got some colleagues out there that are digging into it, like Tim Banting out of the UK has actually been doing a lot of good stuff on this, and Kevin Keeler as well too. What I do understand is this: Facilitator is a shared item, and I'm unclear of how that licensing works for that situation, because all these other copilots are tied to individuals having that feature set enabled going forward. And the question that always came up before is: there's 3 of us here, 4 of us here. If only 2 of us had the Teams license that had Copilot and the other 2 didn't, does it show up in this meeting right now? Does it not? So again.
Well, and that actually gets into a deep conversation, because I have Teams calls. We're a Teams house here at CTI with outside people.
Yeah.
Right. So if I want to bring in, let's say, a generic Copilot feature, whatever that Copilot feature is, can I not, if I'm talking to somebody outside of our organization or somebody who doesn't have a Teams license?
Well, that starts to bring out an even bigger can of worms, because if we're talking about agents that are recording the meeting, if you're the owner of the meeting, Tim, your agent is recording it, but the other outside parties don't have access to that. So you're going to start to see people want to be the owners of meetings going forward.
Yeah.
And it's also a little bit, it's different when you think about it from the Microsoft Places standpoint. If you compare that to some of their competitors on the market, Zoom's feature like that for managing workplace reservations is by site, by license, by device. Cisco's is by building. Microsoft is the first one coming out there saying it's got to be your whole organization, because frankly, it doesn't make any sense to have, if I'm going to ask it the kind of question, well, where are my colleagues working today and what's a good day to go in and what room do you recommend? If it can't see everybody, it doesn't make sense. So it is part of that cache piece I was talking about before, that push to get everybody onto a higher level of licensing, which is going to be an interesting play, especially when the competitors aren't doing that.
Neil, we'll turn the corner here. What surprised you about Ignite this week?
Well, obviously, there's the 2 shows coming into one now. I mean, it used to be Inspire and Ignite, separate partner and customers. So it was a bigger show. I was in Seattle last year for Ignite. And the kind of area where the partners were showing all their wares, a kind of petting zoo, was actually quite small, and they were distributed across multiple floors. It actually felt like, I don't want to liken it to Infocom or ISE, but it felt like a trade show in the kind of partner hub. It was big and it was buzzing. And I said to everybody, don't expect much. It's going to be a small thing, And it was like, oh, wow, actually, it's it's a big trade show event. So for the actual space, I think the other interesting thing I forgot to mention earlier is in the announcements, this idea of going back to sort of mainframe terminal with this Windows 365, I don't want to say compute, but they've got this kind of thin client that they announced that's coming out. And it's like
365 link.
That's it. They've basically reinvented a wise terminal. Which
okay, so here's the problem with that statement. All four of us are old enough to have worked on terminals.
There you go.
For those under, let's say, 35 or 40, what exactly do you mean by that?
Yeah, and again, I did some stuff with DEC back in the day on VT240 terminals and VT420s and VAX and things like that. So the idea that you've got the compute in the cloud now, not just in a mainframe sitting in a server hall, but in the cloud. So and then a thin client, a dumb client, which is almost like a port replicator you plug a monitor, a keyboard, and a mouse and a webcam into, and the power, the compute is being separated into the cloud. Clearly, with bandwidth and processing power, this is now more possible and more doable. I do wonder as to how we're going to transmit uncompressed or compressed video from there to the cloud for things like Teams. But it did pose the question in my mind as to, could this be then a low-cost room system in the future that then you put into a meeting room and then hook a USB webcam up to, and that could be your low-cost huddle room, Teams room solution in the future? So that was kind of like, okay.
Even less expensive than an i3 version, right? Yeah.
Clearly, yeah. So again, that was something that I saw that was just like, okay. But it was funny again, being of an age, and I'm going to be of an older age on Sunday, but being of an age where, knowing about that whole kind of, again, it goes in trends, doesn't it? Again, everything goes to the mainframe terminal, and then the power comes to the edge, comes to the compute, and now it's going back to the cloud and back to the mainframe again, and we're going to have, dumb input devices sitting on our desks, and the cloud is going to do all the heavy compute lifting. So yeah, I thought that was an interesting, poignant point.
All right, Durr, what surprised you?
Interesting question. So I'm going to hone in on one idea. It was the attendance, and I see both a good side and a bad side of this. Neil, actually, I think you hit upon a key thing. I was looking up some of the numbers. They estimated they had 14,000 people there in person. This now has surpassed some of our industry's shows like Enterprise Connect and what have you as well. They had registered over 200,000 people, they said. But I heard for the keynote online, they had total sets of eyes of 90,000 people. But still, a show that's having 90,000 people participating in a single day is a pretty phenomenal event. Compared to ISC, for example, they're in the 80s, pushing 75, 80,000, something like that right now. But those are in person. Let's balance the value of that. So I was really impressed with the number of people interested in it and how broad it was. That's a really big surprise. Here's the flip side, the downside. If you watched the keynote when everyone was talking, it was a lot of golf clapping going on, because the announcements were so broad across the spectrum of all of Microsoft's businesses, everything from data center to chipsets to personal compute. There wasn't much in terms of the UC space necessarily main stage. That you had your small faction of those 90,000 people applauding it. And
there was no signs. They weren't holding up. I was in the room. There wasn't signs being held up saying applause.
I was pinging our mutual friend Tom. I'm like, why is it so quiet? He's like, there's no applause signs. That's why. Okay. But so what surprised me about this is the breadth of what we saw there in terms of size is impressive, and it's becoming a very sizable, important thing. And I think in our space, Neil, to your point, those hardware vendors are going to be out in storm, and I think it's going to be more and more important in the next 2 years to be present there, and for customers to attend there as well too. I think you can get a lot of interesting things. On the flip side, it's getting so broad and so big. I mean, you have got niches of people that are interested in the different things, the hyperscalers, everything else that's going on. So we'll see how it evolves. But I was surprised at the scope and of that.
There is a joke about them having 90,000 concurrent views of the keynote that obviously Netflix did not host that.
Tim, when you said we were going to talk about Ignite, I misunderstood you. I thought you said we're going to talk about the the Jake Paul fight, and I was ready to talk about that here, and I was gonna.
I
We're
will
not
tell
gonna.
you, there was a total side note. There was a piece in ESPN that Roger Goodell, the commissioner of American football, called Netflix on Monday morning, probably first thing, probably Sunday actually, and said, "Hey guys, just making sure you're not going to screw this up because Netflix is also live broadcasting 2 NFL games on Christmas Day. So we shall see."
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
not like anybody turns on any technology in their house on Christmas Day. You don't really have to.
Exactly. What could go wrong? Danto, what surprised you?
Well, the two things did. First one, I'm going to steal credit, whichever word you prefer to use. Our colleague that you mentioned before, Kevin Keeler, when he said, you know what, all right, it's time. Microsoft had announced so many co-pilots that were supposed to be assisting the people, but they're kind of running off on their own right now, which is why, I wore the agent glasses and the joke. These aren't co-pilots. These should be flying the plane at this point. These are pilots. So we've sort of had a different take.
To use that analogy, then, do you want these pilots piloting?
Well, there was a lot of press right before Ignite, coincidentally, about how some of the co-pilot stuff is really good and some of it's more gimmicky than not, and the company is over-rotated on it. And I'm not going to wade into that, but some of the AI is useful and some of it isn't. So that's not a surprise. That was kind of an expectation. But yeah, they should be flying the plane by now. They're pilots at this point. Give them their damn license. The other thing that
are you riding on that plane that they're flying then?
I'm not coming on that one on Sunday. No,
I'm not yet.
Oh God, no! And if you take a look on social media, you see I've posted any number of things about how I adore a lot of the Microsoft products and the people, but I don't rent software on my PC. I'm still using install once, pay once, use once operating systems, suites. It's like you see the VDI or the Wise terminal, as you put it, Neil, as something to make the devices in the room smaller and cheaper. I see it as a way so that they can charge for utilization and get recurring revenue. So that's it. But my biggest takeaway has nothing to do with any of that. My biggest surprise, I didn't attend in person. I attended remotely, and I watched a number of the sessions, and I participated in a number of sessions. And Satya's keynote was very good. Very broad, as you guys pointed out, but it was, very understandable and entertaining, really long when the next guys came out, but that was worthwhile. The rest of the stream, the rest of the event for a company that's pushing its event capabilities was frankly ridiculous. I tried to attend the session that Ilya did on Teams, which had live audio and only shared video, no actual camera for the speaker, no demonstration. I watched
just the content stream, not the people stream.
Right.
Yeah.
I went to a couple of watched a couple of the sessions that were done with some of the vendors that are standing there, and the people they had on the floor interviewing them. Oh my God, the lady interviewing Chris Barwick didn't even know his name. She said, "I'm standing here with," and put the microphone forward. You expect more from a company like Microsoft, especially when they're pushing this platform to handle remote events. And again, this is the first time they've done something of this size and scale, but they would need to have that same level of keynote quality for all the sessions as well, and they kind of didn't. And that was a bit of a black eye.
They did have on that point. So in person, they had a full production studio set up right in the middle, and they had these massive, great big kind of video walls hanging from the ceiling. So when you're sitting having lunch or whatever, you're watching the Microsoft TV, for want of a better term, that they're producing in the middle. And there was roving reporters going around all the booths. So we were all watching that locally on the big screens, eating our lunches and stuff. And they had live transcription, which I'm guessing was coming from Copilot. But it's interesting to hear that you weren't getting that, because, again, that's a lost opportunity, because they obviously had this amazing production. There's multi-cameras, and it looked like you were watching ringside, a chat show almost that they were producing. It was like a raised up thing, and you could walk around it. I'm amazed to hear that you weren't able to tap into that remotely and watch that remotely as a TV channel.
And I would probably suggest that it met its purpose, that it was there for you to have a background spectacle as an attendee, and it was a nice bone to throw to the people that were watching it online. But how do you go to a session and not be able to see the speaker And when they were sharing content, at one point they went into a Teams call and the camera was on and you could see the speaker, and it's like, this wouldn't have been very hard to do, but nobody thought it out from that perspective. So
Ilya's session was moved. Yeah, and I'm not defending it or them, but Ilya's session was weird because I walked down to like room 196, and then it was like when you got there, it's like, no, this is the server 2005 Azure boot camp, whatever. I was like, you've got to go all the way back over there for Ilya's. So again, maybe there was a last minute thing.
It's not a dig on the product capabilities or the capabilities of Microsoft, but you really probably want to have an event producer that has done this before involved in this kind of an event so that you don't get too many of those situations. And by the way, I was told that Ilya's session, the team session, turned away hundreds of people that wanted to be in the room.
Yeah, it's 3D, standing.
It's amazing. So nothing against the content.
I was going to ask, Neil, I was surprised from my perspective as well. At least even during quarterly earnings, they drop a Teams number or something like that. I rarely heard anything on the main stage about the Teams or the team ecosystem per se. Now, there was a lot of good news coming out. You can look at the press release feed and what have you. It just, but I think, again, maybe everyone can say it just kind of fell under the umbrella of the agentic AI storyline.
Yeah, so there was, I think Nicole, I'm going to say Sergelinger, I can't pronounce her surname.
She did a session also. But
she did a session, and again they did the demo of the translator again. But Ilya's was the only, if you were in the world we're generally in all the time, Ilya's was the one you wanted to go to. That was the Teams session. That's the only actual session I went to because it was the only one that's relevant to me. I don't care about Exchange or Azure.
Think of that though. Think of that alignment. They had just one session around an in-room device. There was another Places session as well too, but and then you go out to that expo floor and you had I thought a decent number of hardware vendors that were present. Yeah, they were small and clustered together, but it's an interesting. It didn't balance out necessarily in terms of who was there at the expo and then what were the educational session opportunities as well around room experience, I guess.
The other interesting on the expo, because there was two shows coming together, there was some vendors that had two booths, which was because they'd signed up for Inspire and they'd signed up for Ignite. So I was talking to Randy Chapman at Logi, and they had two booths. It's like there's one on that side and one on that side. You could there was different stuff, but if you want to see a meetup, you could go either side and see it.
And they were also doing an event on the West Coast, so they were in multiple places at the same time.
Omnipresent. But yeah, there was at least two or three vendors that had two separate booths on two sides of the thing. Again, the partner side and the customer side. So whether Microsoft hadn't sort of fully brought together both sides of it, I'm not quite sure. Whether they had to pay twice, I don't know. But anyway.
I mean, like again, this is kind of the breadth and the depth challenge that these guys have across what they were trying to present. I think there was no talk. I mean, I was eagerly listening, trying to hope to hear something around their contact center offering, which is kind of made news, at least in our space as well too. They did talk about the queues feature a little bit in Teams, which is another challenge. We can go into that in another podcast, Tim. But again, there's really sizable business activity that Microsoft did that I don't think had time to get any airtime in that space.
Well, guys, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Mr. David Danto, how do people connect with you?
I'm an analyst on talkingpointswithaz.com, and you can always look for me on LinkedIn or now Blue Sky, which is starting to become a very exciting thing. If you haven't grabbed your handle there, you should do it as quickly as possible. But anybody can always look me up at danto.info.
All right. Mr. Neil, thank you, sir. Enjoy Chicago. Happy birthday. Go see a Bears game.
Thank you, Tim.
How do people connect with you or Crestron?
I generally make a nuisance of myself on LinkedIn. I'm going to try this Blue Sky thing that David's on about. But yeah, LinkedIn's generally the place you can find me. And obviously Crestron.com for anything Crestron related. And I've got podcasts and videos and stuff. So none of them as good as Craig's, but we all try.
We do all try. None of us are as good as Craig. Craig Durr, Collective. He's blushing now.
I don't know how to answer that one. I don't know. Anyway.
How do people connect with you, sir?
Well, in all those likely channels people talked about, it is the collab-collective.com. There's also some information on social media under both my handle, Craig Durr, and Collab Collective on LinkedIn, Twitter. I'll never call it X. Blue Sky, Instagram, TikTok. I have a dancing video. I dance in the background. I'm sorry. And of course, through any other type of events coming up, which there'll be some taking place here in Q1, which I'm excited to be at and see people
There's
again.
a small little show in Barcelona. So hey,
it's where we're going to see in person, all of you, hopefully.
We will see everybody in person. So for Tim Albright, don't follow me because I will complain about said Chicago Bears. But go by the website, AVNation.tv. That's AVNation.tv. You can find this program and a host of others. Check out a brand new AV Career Mastermind. Our host, Jim Weaver, sits down with West Point. It's a really, really interesting conversation talking about how folks can move from, quite frankly, military into the world of technology. Really, really great conversation. So check that out. If you want to read me talking about something other than technology, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. If not, no big deal. But go by the website, please. Well, thank you, sir. Thank you. AVNation.tv. That's AVNation.tv. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. That is all the time we have for AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AV Nation.
This is AV Nation.